I've previously spoke about the first part of the Max miniseries The Penguin, covering its first 4 episodes, its characters, and the dynamics it creates within the wake of the Batman. As the show has since seen the remainder of its episodes run, I think now is as good of a time as any for a part 2. The power struggle shifts in Gotham's criminal underworld, as Sophia takes revenge on the Falcone family, eliminating each and every relative responsible for her mother's murder, separating herself from her family entirely, even going so far as to reverting back to her mother's maiden name and starting her own criminal organization with it. While Oz takes on Maroni's mob, systematically taking out the family unit one by one. But while Nadia and their son Taj die as intended, Sal survives his assassination attempt and breaks out of Blackgate. Ultimately, a shared hatred of a common problem unites 2 warring crime families, with what's left of the Maroni and Falcone families coming together to form one. Oz has made some pretty powerful enemies, and together, the 2 form a power trip, putting a target on the Penguin. Yet despite this growing threat, Oz's operation flourishes, as he peddles bliss to the streets of Gotham City. He's rose in the ranks, but at the cost of the safety of all those that know him. His loved ones face the consequences of his actions, causing the villain for a brief moment to play hero against the villains that he's created, only to learn in the end that he is the biggest monster out of all of them. If it wasn't clear within the first 4 episodes, well then it's crystal clear by the last 4, that while Oz may be the titular character, and to some small extent the protagonist of the series, he's not just a bad guy. He's a bad guy. The worst guy, really. He is a villain through and through, and whatever redeemable qualities he may have displayed are all false facades. There is no good in him. Now before I go into depth here, I want to address something that's kind of been annoying me about this series for a while, and it's less about the show and more about the critiques of it. I constantly saw people make posts or writers write articles asking where Batman is throughout the show. Respectfully, if you're watching The Penguin asking where Batman is, I really think you may be missing the point here. This isn't Batman's story. While it shares a setting with The Dark Knight, it doesn't mean that that character is a focal point, or even a point of interest at all in this story. The world around Batman will still exist whether he's there or not. These events can happen without him there at all, or even without him knowing of anything that's going on. Gotham City is pretty much the crime capital of the country. Maybe the world, really. There is so much corruption on a grand scale, with Batman seeming to be the only rebellion against it. So since justice is one and crime is many, I think it makes sense that he's not at each and every crime scene all of the time. The Batman is needed to exist in this universe to tell this story, but it doesn't mean that he in fact needs to be a part of this particular story. Honestly, for as much as I love Batman, I didn't need him to be incorporated into this story, nor did I ever expect him to, considering what the name of the show was. Having said all of this, if you've for some reason yet to see any of these episodes, you might want to pause the video and come back after you have, because from this point on, spoilers ahead. Sophia Falcone is a very interesting character. As I said before, it's this character that completely steals the spotlight. And this character kind of comes full circle in these 8 episodes. Her rise to power comes with a reflection, and in the end, she realizes that she's become the people that she's fought against. The people that she's aspired to be anything but, acting every bit as cutthroat as her father before her. Maybe even more so in some cases. Becoming a more than credible threat to Oz and a successor to her family throne. Sophia becomes powerful at the expense of her humanity. The person gets lost in the persona. And while for a time being that side of her seems long lost, before the season's climax, she regains a sense of self after seeing the damage that she's done. While she spares no sympathy for her family that she's slain, she realizes the weight of her actions when she sees how her cousin Gia is affected by them. Seeing the pain that she's inadvertently caused her cousin breaks Sophia and snaps her out of the state that she's in. After recognizing the damage that she's done, Sophia attempts to move on with her life, further distancing herself from what remains of her family, leaving both their name and the business behind. She's become the killer that the media made her out to be. In order to defeat her demons, she had to become one, and now she has to live with that. Ultimately, her self-struggles take priority. She loses sight of her target when she realizes that she's lost sight of herself. Her humanity returns to her at the worst possible moment for someone in the midst of war. And by the credits, she ends up back where she started off her story, being sent away to Arkham Asylum. It's there she reconnects with her doctor/love interest, and where she receives a letter from her half-sister, Selina Kyle, with Catwoman no doubt applauding her for her part in the erasure of the Falcone name. In the end, Sophia has lost, and more importantly, she's lost herself, spending the remainder of her days in Arkham trying to reclaim her sanity. Likewise, Salvatore Maroni meets a similar fate, suffering from a failure to off Oz. Though he's not beaten by the Penguin, he's instead beaten by time that's working against him. Of course, this is still a victory Oz is willing to claim, because as we learn, everything he does is just to add to his own legend. By which I mean, his own myth. Oz has always been a self-centered narcissist, but these last episodes, especially the last episode, makes it clear just how far that goes. And it is seemingly limitless. He has no love to give anyone whatsoever. Any affection he displays is an illusion. When he's offered an opportunity to show his love for others, he instead projects the love of a false image that he's made for himself. If this half of the show has taught us anything about this character, it should be that he's an unreliable narrator. He is not to be trusted by anyone, even the few that are close to him. Calling him an opportunist would be doing his vindictiveness a disservice. He is the ultimate hustler. Every word of comfort that he gives is just a pleasant-sounding lie. Every story that he tells is fiction presented in a non-fiction setting. Sure, sometimes his lies are veils of protection.
She died a few years back, I never asked.
But more often than not, they're false pleas for sympathy to gain the trust of those he works with. The villain is always the victim in his own story, especially when he actually isn't. Framing his brother's passing as a tragedy and freak accident when in actuality, it happened at his own hands. An act of pure pettiness cost his two brothers their lives and his mother her sanity. This side of the season offers up a lot of insight into the character's codependency with his mother. The narrative at first makes you believe that this closeness was brought on by the sudden death of his brothers, but in actuality that event couldn't have split them further apart. You think they found comfort in each other while mourning, but in actuality, it's shown that Oz has always had a very weird infatuation with his mom. So much so that he let his brothers drown to death just so he could spend one-on-one time with her instead. A secret which was silently shared between the two of them, mother and son, for years. A fact his mother would have to know and live with for the rest of her life. Somehow trying to learn to live with his actions, trying to love him in spite of loathing him for what he took from her. Unable to forgive, unable to forget, just forever living with this regret. The truth of the matter is that since that night, Oswald's mother has always hated him. So much so that when she's confronted by the sociopath that she raised, she almost puts a hit out on him, having her monster taken out by the local mobster that he idolized. The one that he's talked up the whole series. Instead, she tried to support Oz in an effort to get him to become something big, hoping that one day somehow she could find comfort in his success. But she never does. She can never accept him for what he's done to her, what he's done to his brothers. She can never accept him for what he's done, while Oz can never accept what it is he's done. When he's offered the opportunity to save his mother by admitting the truth, he still denies it. When his mother admits that she's always known it to be true, he still denies it. When she begs him to admit it to save her finger, he is still adamant in his denial, because he's always the victim. He can't take the responsibility of victimizer despite the fact that he clearly is one. Past the denial, Oswald cares very little for what anyone else wants. His mother exclaims to him that she doesn't want to live life without her faculties, actually asking Oz to end her life if she gets to that point in her illness. Oz of course denies her this, but later when she suffers a stroke and goes comatose, Oz keeps her alive and alert because his comfort trumps her will. Even prior to this, when finding out about her condition, Oz doesn't mourn for his mother. He cries that she'll never be able to give him the satisfaction of saying that she's proud of him. It's not about her, it's about what she could do for him. The last mindful action this woman took was an attempt at her son's life, stabbing him in the stomach. But Oz can't accept that. So when questioned on his injury, he rewrites history.
What happened? Sophia, she stabbed me.
You lie!
Oz lives a lie because he can't face the truth. As a matter of fact, he gets so wrapped up in this fantasy that he rejects all reality for it. The series ends with Oz's mother stuck in neutral, unable to speak, unable to move, but still aware of her unfortunate situation. And Oz acts as if he's given his mother all that she's ever wanted, despite deliberately doing the opposite of the one thing that she asked. He then leaves her on her own to relive his glory day, the day that his mother took him out dancing, with his girlfriend playing the part of his mother. He turns the lights off on a sad truth to turn the light on to a sweet-feeling lie, to the comfort of false nostalgia, neglecting his family in need in favor of the attention of the object of his infatuation. This moment is deeply unsettling, and quite unnerving. I mean, I know there's a trope of Italians always being mama's boys, but this is just excessive. Oz Cobb would make Norman Bates look like normal Bates. The more you learn about the Penguin, the less you wish you knew. This moment is very uncomfortable. And it's very telling of an unstable man with some deep-seated mommy issues. It's honestly enough to make Freud blush. However, there's another added layer of tragedy to this scene, because it's truly history repeating itself all over again. Yet again, Oz dances the night away and makes himself believe that he's having a good time. And yet again, it's with a woman well aware of what a monster that he is. Someone who will loathe him in private while feigning love for him in public.
Why? He would work for a man that murdered your friends. Well, he helped cover it up so that my father could keep on killing women.
Whatever Oz's relationship with Eve entails, I think it's more than likely that she'll never trust him again. The worst part of all of this is in the end, Oz will never be able to admit to any faults or flaws. He's just set on believing that the world is always against him, gaslighting himself into believing he's the victim and not the victimizer, that he's the hero and not the villain, that he's the little engine that could, the little guy that made it, and not a monster masquerading around as a businessman. It's a sob story that he's told to himself and others, managing to gain the trust of many by reaching out to those who feel underutilized, grooming the lost, investing in the overlooked. Real cult of personality type stuff. Emphasis on cult. When you think back to his meeting Vic, I think it calls into question if this was always part of his plan. He acts as if he spared Vic due to his touching speech, but in actuality, it's much more likely that he always intended to use Vic as an accomplice. I made mention of him connecting with Vic over their shared differences, but I can now see that that was a tactic to forge a bond and gain his trust. And I, much like Vic, just fell for the act. It's a strategy the character literally admits to in later episodes. Oz has the gift of the gab, and a disposition of relating to the little guy.
I'm sure you promised him something.
Chance to be somebody. Nick was tired of being overlooked.
Now that's not to say that their friendship and the mentorship between the two was all fake. As a matter of fact, I would argue that it was probably too real for Oz to handle. As when Vic confesses that he sees Oz as family, Oz begrudgingly admits that he does too. But unfortunately, we know how Oz treats his family, and like he did to his brothers, he winds up taking Vic's life. This moment comes out of nowhere, but if anything, it's true to this character. A man who has shown no loyalty to anyone he's ever crossed paths with. Not even the people that he's linked through nature or nurture. Oz doesn't love. It's an emotion that he can emulate and use as a tactic to manipulate. Something he uses to exploit others' blind spots, but it's not something that I think he can actually truly feel. Because Oz is a virus that infects everything he comes in contact with, shortening their life expectancy, and worse off, worsening their life experience in the process. He has done no good for anyone but himself, though he'll convince himself of otherwise. Now, having said that, Vic wasn't a perfect youth. He was getting involved with bad stuff, but he had a conscience about it. The kid had a moral compass. He just didn't always follow its direction. His association with Oz continued his progression into deviancy, committing all kinds of crimes in the names of appeasing his company, and then trying to justify his unjustifiable actions. Victor took a life in an effort to protect the same person who would go on to take his own life. What's sad is that Vic was warned countless times about Oz's true nature. He had ample opportunity to get away, and instead, he invested in his own murderer. He put his life in the hands that eventually took his life. It's a tragic end to an already tragic tale, and it's in good company with all the other tragedy that accompanied Oz Cobb. By the end of everything, Oz has won, but at the cost of losing everything he allegedly loved. He beat the competition, but he didn't receive the prize that he was after. He will never have his parents' pride or respect. His closest allies are either all dead or now have a deep-seated hatred of him. He is the king of nothing. But I don't think that really matters to a guy like him so long as he has a crown, so long as he has this illusion of power. Having said that, this is also more than likely the beginning of Oz's empire. Getting rid of the rest of Gotham's top crime bosses does set him up as being the most powerful currently. He'll get all the respect that he desired, but it won't come from the peers he once had because he's killed them. He'll be appreciated by some, but it will never be by the person that he wanted to be appreciated by. And in spite of all his power, he will be loved by none. In the end, everyone loses, even if they win. There's not a happy ending in sight for any. Every character has been made worse off from this experience. The Penguin is an absolute tragedy. Now that it's all said and done, I can say without a doubt that I love this series. Like the Batman that came before it, this left me in constant suspense. Each episode provided new twists and turns that completely changed the narrative and flip what the audience knows on its head. If I had any complaints about this series at all, it's that I don't think it fully made use of the mythos that it was a part of. Sure, it gave us established characters like Sal Maroni and Sophia Falcone, who now feel like important inclusions into this iteration of Gotham, but I think this could have benefited from a few more names from comics and cartoons. I'm not saying bring in the big guns, because this is just a side story outside of the main line. Like, no one's saying throw in Mr. Freeze or Two-Face, but I think a Black Mask or a KG Beast would be acceptable. It would also help the wider continuity by introducing smaller characters that could possibly have a part to play in future installments. Or, maybe much more importantly, characters who would never get the opportunity to appear in future installments, as there's really only so much screen time you could give. There's a lot to love about this show, but there are also some elements that I find are somewhat underdeveloped. I find that a lot of the time, a lot of the relationships the series sets up are either underwritten or mostly unexplained. Granted, none of these were exactly focal points of the plot, they're just happenstance, so it's somewhat understandable. The biggest example here has to be the relationship between Sophia and Julian. When Sophia arrives at Arkham, she meets her new doctor, Dr. Rush, who has a very eerie energy to him, and is immediately smitten with the Falcone family's former favorite daughter. They have a doctor-patient relationship until Rush eventually resigns from his position at Arkham due to the mistreatment of his patient. He then continues to treat her after her stay at the asylum. Then she kicks him to the curb, then he comes back, and all of a sudden they're going all 50 Shades of Dark Knight. I don't really know what this was. I don't even know why this was, but this was. Now, I've long theorized that the Julian character might have a bigger role to play somewhere down the line, because his character is just too strange to not have some significance somewhere in something. I've heard some believe him to be some version of either Hugo Strange or the Scarecrow. I don't know if he has a role to play on that scale, but I do definitely think we'll be seeing more of him in the future. and I think him ending up back at Arkham kinda solidifies that. There are also a couple takeaways I have for this season that I couldn't really put anywhere else, so here are just some things I thought worth noting. I find it funny that both of Gotham's biggest crime bosses have dipshit, cringe-inducing sons with inflated egos, because Taj and Alberto are practically written to be the same exact person, or at least the same exact type of person. They're just out here embarrassing their families and ruining their reputations, not living up to the legacy whatsoever. They're their own unique, lame lineage. I think it's a pretty good commentary about nepotism and self-importance. Because these guys, they're like the Chet Hankses of the criminal underworld.
I'm like the Joker.
You're like the
Do
Joker.
I look like a guy with a plan? Batman, you complete me. Go.
In the last episode, when Oz takes Sophia to the edge of the dock at gunpoint, I was getting some serious Gotham flashbacks to the first and last episode, which ironically saw their Oz walk to the edge of a dock at gunpoint. Last thing I want to make mention of, because it could be nothing, and it probably is, but it feels almost like something to me. Oz's, for a lack of a better word, love interest is named Eve Carlo. Now this name might not mean much, but this last name is shared by the Batman villain Clayface, the original Clayface being Basil Carlo. And that's not the only similarity between these two characters. The two are also thespians, so to speak. They have parts to play and they play them well, sinking in and out of roles with ease.
Dressing like this. Is it for you or your clients?
Depends on the situation.
Eve has different costumes and acts out different roles for all of her clients. She adapts to their needs, becoming different versions of herself. By the end of the show, we even see her take on the role of Oz's mother. I think you could very easily make some sort of comparison or have this act as an allegory for what it's like being Clayface. To constantly be changing, to play a different part at any given moment. Again, I don't know if there's an actual connection there. I would imagine probably not. But I think it's interesting to think about this character maybe not as an adaptation of Clayface, but as an allusion to that comic character. Anyway, with all that being said, that was the Penguin. What I love about the Batman franchise thus far is that I never know where the story's going. I can never predict what turn it's going to take, and what ripple effect that might have in the grand scheme of things. But I always look forward to seeing what comes next. And if you like this video, and you're looking forward to what comes next, and maybe you'd be interested in seeing me continue to cover this universe, taking a look back at this Riddler's origin, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Penguin is the bird that cannot fly.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.